Hello, welcome to my very first career race for Renault in Formula One here in Melbourne, which is, of course, my home race along with Daniel Ricciardo. We did have a little bit of meet and greet to do before we got right down to action, of course, because I didn't meet all these people at winter testing. But before we knew it, it was time to get stuck into the car and get going. And the first thing we did was do the track acclimatization, which I didn't have too much difficulty with. I know this track very, very well from my junior career, so it was very, very simple. But of course, it was sort of crossing the T's, dotting the I's to keep Renault happy, to make sure they knew that I knew exactly how to get around this circuit. We also then powered into fuel saving, which again I didn't have too much difficulty with. As you can see, we just overtook a stricken Red Bull there. I don't know who that was. I think that was Ricciardo, but I can't quite remember exactly. And I didn't have too much difficulty with the fuel saving. We expected to save around 5 kilos of fuel for the race, but to be honest, I like to have a lot more fuel and run in higher fuel mixes for the race. It also depends entirely on the engine wear, on engine degradation, but as it's the first race of the season, engine degradation isn't an issue, so I'm thinking let's try and max the engine out as much as we can. Right towards the end of the session, however, we did manage to set our fastest lap, which put us into P4. We were running around on the super softs, and as you can see, it was a pretty clean lap. The fact that we came fourth. Admittedly, all the cars around us were on the softs, so that's partly why we did as well as we did, but I'm not too disappointed. It was right at the end of the session as well. There was a couple of things that I would have liked to have fixed on those final couple of corners, for instance. Just as you can see, the car was a little bit squirmy, so that's something that we looked in at FP2, where I really started to focus more on the car setup as opposed to the programs that Renault wanted me to run. However, quite early on we did do the tyre saving, and I didn't have any difficulty with tyre saving at all. It's my driving style is very, very easy on the tyres. I tend to burn through fuel quite a lot, and I'm very sort of hesitant to be heavy on the brakes, and I like to brake very early and then really get the power down, and obviously try and avoid any wheel spin. So tyre wear is something that I've never struggled with in my career, and I don't expect to struggle at all this season making the step up into Formula One. Towards the end of the session, we did jump into race strategy, purely because FP2, it starts around the same time as the race. As you can see, the sun's quite low in the sky there, so that's really where that sun's going to be for the race. So it's sort of the closest conditions we can get to the race. So that's why I sort of figured the race strategy now would be the best time to do it. I did have a momentary stuff up in the third lap, but nothing too dangerous. There was no risk of a crash or anything. I just locked up the brakes a bit too hard, just trying to shave as much time off as possible. But in terms of the target lap time, as you can see up in the top right, I was never really troubled by it, and unfortunately we just needed all 5 laps to do it because of that stuff up in the third lap. When we get on to FP3 now, we only really had the qualifying time to do so. It was just narrowing down the strategy, what I was thinking of doing for the race, and also nailing down the car setup as well. That's something that is very, very important to me. I love a lot of oversteer, and it was quite difficult to really find that balance, because if there was too much oversteer, particularly coming out of that final corner, it was very, very difficult to get the hammer down. And that final corner is probably the most important corner to get right on this circuit, because it goes onto that long main straight, and if you get it wrong, you're wiping a lot of time off. So I was sort of tinkering around with setups, just trying to get the ideal setup for my preferences as a driver. But of course, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter too much if it's one pip to the left or one pip to the right on the rear wings or the front wings or whatever the case may be. But I did manage to set the qualifying time. We did have a target of around 15th. They were happy with 15th. They would have been delighted with 11th, and in the end I crossed the line up in 7th place with a 1:27.5, which is a fantastic time, and so a time that personally I think I could have done a little bit better. Of course, being the morning session, that sort of thing. I'm hoping with qualifying, when we get the extra fuel mix, I'm hoping to get easily into the 1:26.5s, and that's what I'm sort of aiming for. Of course, that never, I may not have even had a qualifying session, because I went out again right towards the end of this short session. It's only an hour long FP3, so I thought I'd go out again on the Ultra Softs and try and see if I could improve on that 127.5 now that the track's been rubbing in just that little bit more. But as you can see, I got a little bit squirmy, and then when I coming up to turn 5, you can see I just came a little bit too close to the wall, and I did have a little bit of a trip across the grass. Thankfully, no damage to the car, and thankfully I managed to stop it before we went slamming into the barriers on the other side of the track. But it was a very, very close call, and an accident that close to the end of FP3 could have spelt disaster, but it didn't. And we can now move on to qualifying, where we are hoping for anything above 11th, but after the performance in FP3, I'm thinking we may be able to finish a little bit higher. So here we are then in Q1 of the Australian Grand Prix, qualifying for the race. We did come out just behind Lance Stroll. That's Stroll in the Williams ahead of us, but he's the second man out. Romain Grosjean, it was the first man to lead the charge out onto the track, and he's quite a long way up to the field already. He's up just going through turn 4 as we come out. We started off a little bit slow. We wanted to let Stroll get a little bit of a gap from us. We didn't want to be too close to him coming into those final few corners. So we did just slowly back off a little bit, and then we started to wind it right up. Coming around that final corner, it's really, really crucial to get an amazing exit out of that, because this long straight, as I say, it's very, very important. So with Stroll a long way up the field, thankfully no one coming out of the pits, and we managed to get to it on our very first lap. It was a very, very tidy first exit, a little bit slow. We could have gone a fraction faster, straight onto that DRS as we come down now into turn 3. Really, really hard on the brakes, kissing that apex. I did very, very well on that one, and another very tough, like twisty, sort of almost chicane really, and then we're flat out through turns 5 and 6. And coming up now, or is this turn 6? I can't even remember. But we do manage to, we're kissing these apexes really, really well, because we're not stuck in that dirty air of Lance Stroll. We're just far enough away that the dirty air is not holding us down as we do a really, really hard brake now, and we come around to this really sort of long sweeping left-hander coming up to turns 11 and 12. Now these are the corners that I really, really struggle with. If you brake too late, you're going to carry too much speed into that chicane. If you brake too early, you've wiped off a lot of speed for this, which is, although there's a slight sort of dogleg right, it's flat out, and you really don't want to lose too much speed. But I didn't do too badly there. Again, kissing that apex. Now we're coming up to this sort of final bit where you just you're just letting go of the accelerator. You're not braking for that corner. Then these final 2 corners of 15 and 16. 15, you've got to be slow enough, and it's almost painfully slow at times. And then you want to unwind the car onto that long straight. We closed up a little bit on Lance Stroll. Now Grosjean went through with a 127.1, but we set provisional pole with a 126.7. It's not to last, of course, because Lewis Hamilton is not far behind, and he will take provisional pole. There he goes there with a 125.6. But the speed, the time that we had was more than enough for us to get through into Q2, so we could just sit back and relax for the rest of this session. There is confirmation in the end that we finished P6. We only set 1 lap. Everyone else went out at least another time. Our teammate was 2.5 tenths down on us in P8, but of course that's not too bad either for Renault. Being 6th and 8th is fantastic, but of course that does mean that 5 drivers are out. Kvyat, Van Dorn, Stroll, Ericsson and Verline are all out. So we progress into Q2 now. We do have the target, remember, of P11. I'm sort of thinking that we can get into Q3. So what we do is we've got the spare set of Ultra Softs that we didn't use in Q1. But we are going to go out on the Ultra Softs, and we're going to set a banker lap, because I'm going to try for a little bit of a strategy here. Now what you'll see happens is as I unwind, you can see there's actually a Ferrari behind. I don't know who that is. It's either Vettel or Raikkonen, but they distracted me enough that when we come up to that first corner, you watch, I end up downshifting to the 3rd gear. I'm not supposed to take first corner in 4th gear. I went down in 3rd, and the car wasn't ready for it, and I got a bit of a tank slapper, and so that sent me all the way back to the pits once again and redo our lap. So we went back out again on the Ultra Softs, after pitting, and lucky for me, this was a much better lap. It was a nice clean track. There was no one around to worry about. I could really get that hammer down and just try and set a comfortable lap that'll get us into Q3. But as you will see, when I cross the line, it's not the best lap. We only come in P9, just ahead of our teammate in P10. Now, there's still a little bit of time left in this session, and it's something that I ended up taking a little bit of a gamble. There's exactly 3.5 minutes to go when I decided, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out on the super softs, which is what people like Max Verstappen and Ricciardo, they were all doing that as well. And I figured we could go onto the super softs, and that would put us on a different strategy at the start of the race. Because remember, the time that the fastest time you set in Q2, they're the tyres that you're starting the race on if you make it into Q3. So I thought I would take a bit of a gamble and go out onto the super soft tyres and try and set a much better lap, because I wasn't particularly pleased with the time I set on the ultra softs. So I figured I could go around again on the super softs and try and get something out of it. But unfortunately, it wasn't to happen, and I totally stuffed it up. As I come up, going along this main straight here, this is where I really have to get into it. Now, I'm usually looking at the 100-meter board and dropping it down into 4th gear. But watch, I get down into 4th, and I just did not do very well at all, did I? You can see I got a bit of a tank slapper. I just put a little bit too much throttle in, and as you can see, that I nearly lost the rear end, and that could have been disastrous. But again, I saved it from kissing the wall. But that puts us in a really bad spot now, because we can't go around and set another time. There's only 30-odd seconds left in this session, so we cannot set another time, and we have to hope that P9 is enough. Now, as you will see, right at the end, it is just enough. We go back in the pits, and we do manage to see, you might not be able to see it on the screen, but Romain Grosjean is the last man to cross the line, and we were watching, but we maintained 10th place by the skin of our teeth, because Romain Grosjean is just behind us, just over a 10th behind. So he ends up being eliminated, and we cling on to 10th. It was a gamble that we were hoping was going to pay off. Thankfully, it didn't negatively affect us, but that was a bullet really dodged there. So Grosjean, Alonso, Magnussen, Ocon and Sainz are all eliminated, but both Renaults of Nico and myself go into the final qualifying, Q3. Now, we've only got one spare set of Ultra Softs. They give you an extra set of Ultra Softs, and that's why we are only going to be setting one lap. We wait until there's about 5 minutes to go, and as you can see with the times there, Lewis Hamilton is very, very close to breaking into the 124s. Then it's Bottas, Vettel, Ricciardo, Verstappen, Perez. Hulkenberg did a 127.3, so that is our target. And Felipe Massa is 4/10 down on Nico. So I'm sort of hoping for a 7th place finish, and that's why we've only got one shot at this. We have to go out and set the best time that we possibly can for the race for tomorrow. And what I'll do now is I'll shut up, and you can watch this final lap of qualifying for Australia. So as you can see, we were provisionally in P5, but by the end, Daniel Ricciardo pipped us on his final lap, but no one else really improved. Massa did end up overtaking our teammate Nico, so we end up finishing 4 places above him, but Bottas starts on pole, nearly half a second ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Then it's Kimi Räikkönen, Sebastian Vettel, Daniel Ricciardo and myself in an all-Australian third row, followed by Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Felipe Massa, and then our teammate down in 10th place. This should be a cracker of a race tomorrow.
P6, you must be delighted with that result.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, P6 was a great result in the end. We weren't expecting to finish up as high as we did. So, yeah, it was a pleasant surprise to finish as well as we did, especially after what happened in Q2. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we can convert the qualifying into a good race result for tomorrow.
Talk us through what happened in Q2 at the end.
Yeah, well, I went out on the ultras at the beginning of Q2 and I wasn't that happy with the time, and I thought I could probably do better. And the way the rest of the session was shaping out, we sort of thought, well, let's try and go on to the super softs and try and set a better time on the ultras, and it gave a slightly different strategy for the start of the race, compared to the cars around us. But unfortunately, I lost control of the car on the first corner, and yeah, that's just racing at the end of the day, and so it was a bit of a nervy finish at the end of Q2. But thankfully for us, Grosjean didn't manage to beat us at the end there, so that it worked out in the end. But it was a pretty close call.
What is your target for tomorrow?
We don't really know at the moment. We've still got to talk it over, have a look at the data. We weren't expecting to finish as well as we did in P6. We were expecting to be a little bit lower. So we have to sort of go back and have a look at the data and see what our target is. But I'd be very disappointed if we sort of finished anywhere below sort of P8, P9. I think anything below that will be a disaster for us this weekend.